Hello, in one of my previous videos, I was trying to make a time lapse of the northern celestial pole for the fine folks down in Australia who have never seen Polaris or the northern celestial pole. And whenever I did that using the P1000 with the built-in timer, I noticed that the images didn't come out very well, and I thought maybe it was one of the settings that I had. So I decided what I would do is fiddle around with some of the settings and give it every possible opportunity that it could to expose the image as best as it could. I chose the lowest number f-stop. I zoomed out all the way. I chose the highest speed rating film equivalent in digital terms, and that still wasn't enough, so I ended up cranking the exposure bias as high as it would allow me. And even then I noticed that despite all of that, the best exposure time this thing could give me was 1 second exposure. Out of desperation, I went back to my Nikon D90 and I tried something similar. This image was taken a few minutes after this one. So in terms of lighting, the P1000 really couldn't see much of anything compared to the D90. And so that led me down a bit of a rabbit hole concerning cameras and how well they work in low light, etc. And I must admit that the limitation on the P1000 really is, I find, to be arbitrary and somewhat dumb, shall we say. In this one, I had an 8-second exposure with an exposure bias of 5/3 EV. This one appears even brighter, and I think this one here I had cranked to the maximum, which worked out to 8/3 EVs and 13 seconds. This one here was so overexposed I could hardly even see the stars. So now I was faced with a little bit of a dilemma. If I want to take pictures of the night sky, I'm not going to sit there and try to push the button every 30 seconds for several hours, so I would need something that can do it automatically. Do I find a way to get my existing D90 to take pictures at regular intervals, or do I get myself a new one? I do have the Nikon ML-L3 remote control. I even spent a little bit of time taking it apart to see if I could find a couple of solder points that I could rig an external switch to fake this thing into transmitting a code. And without a whole lot of success, I decided I was going to try something else. So I ended up going online looking for an alternative. And as it turns out, and I can leave this link in the description below, somebody already went to the effort of reverse engineering this. They've got an oscilloscope and they looked at the burst pattern, and they even developed arduino code along with a schematic that allows you to hook up an infrared LED with a resistor to one of the pins and have an Arduino be able to control the camera as if it was that remote. So I ended up going this route because I do have an Arduino Uno, and I ended up going through a box of electronic components that is destined for recycling, and I found an old remote control that I had taken apart. It was one of those Apple TV remotes. Taking it apart, I wanted to see how it was put together because I had another remote. And so I ended up using the IR LED from that one to be able to control my D90. And I'm going to play the footage of the time lapse that I took with that. I took 2 evenings worth of time-lapse videos, but it was a success right out of the gate. As you can see, I've got quite a few tabs open, and I have been looking for a web page that I came across, and I can't find it anymore, but I did read somewhere that somebody said cameras have a limitation of 1 second exposures. And that might be due to the technology involved, and whenever you get too long exposures, weird things start happening and you might get signal crossover between adjacent pixels or something, I don't know. But like this guy, I was a little bit surprised to see that I couldn't get more than 1 second exposure out of the Nikon P1000. And as somebody pointed out, it's in the specification right here. So for the P1000, you can see ISO 1600 is 1 second. ISO 800 is a maximum 2-second exposure, 400 4. 200 has two different settings, but if we keep this trend, multiply the ISO by the number of seconds, they all come out to 1600. So half of 3200 is 1600. This one slightly breaks the mold. Half of 6400 is 32. The only one that allows me to get twice as much exposure than the default of the product being 1600 is to go ISO 100 with a 30-second exposure. This could be a problem if you're taking pictures of the stars because the stars move 15 degrees per hour. There's 60 minutes in an hour. Half of that is 30 seconds, or it would be 1/20th of 15 degrees, which would represent 1/8 of a degree of rotation in that amount of time. So when you're dealing with 30-second long exposures, in order to double the exposure time that this camera will allow you, you're dealing with a very likelihood of getting a short star arc rather than a pinpoint of light. So this can be a bit of a problem. I went online and I tried to find the information. I think it is buried somewhere in here, but despite my attempts to find it again, I can't seem to find a chart for the D90 similar to what I see here for the P1000. But the D90 is capable of much longer exposures. As it turns out, one of the evenings that I was making my time lapse, thanks to this homemade remote control interval timer mechanism, I was able to capture what looked like some kind of plane or something like that move across the sky. And in this case, this image has an exposure time of 8 seconds. And sure enough, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and almost 8. It looks like the D90 has firmware capable of overcoming the limitations of the sensor. From what I can tell, it appears like the D90 is able to overcome the physical limitations of the hardware by taking multiple 1-second exposures internally and stacking them together to be able to generate a much longer exposure image. In terms of lighting and camera settings for taking pictures of the night sky, there are resources out there, and this could be a very deep rabbit hole that someone could go into. I'm not going to cover them in this video, but I did just want to touch on this very, very briefly. And finally, I found this. I referred to ImageMagick earlier, and I'm going to try using the script or the information that this person has provided here to let me use the ImageMagick tool that I already have installed on my computer to generate a star trail similar to what I've seen others like Wade's Underworld do on their channels. So without talking any further, I'm going to include some of the star trails and some of the time-lapse videos that I took of the Northern Celestial Pole with my Nikon D90 right about here. That's going to be it for the moment. As always, I would appreciate the thumbs up and the comment below. If you haven't subscribed and you like my content, I would appreciate the subscribe. That'll be it for the moment. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in another video soon enough. So bye for now.